New Mexico Grass tells the story of cannabis in the land of enchantment. From the Llano Estacado to Shiprock, and from the Sangre de Cristos down the Rio Grande and past Mesilla, the story of New Mexico is alive with culture and wisdom, and cannabis has long been a part of that tale. Please join us as we sit down with our friends and neighbors across this great state, and let's learn what they have to say.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to New Mexico Grass. We're really excited today to have our next guest. Her name is Trishelle Kirk. She's from a very interesting cannabis establishment that's already up and running, mostly up in Albuquerque, but they have other locations, called Everest Apothecary. It's super interesting. We've had some politicians on. We've had Pat Davis, who runs a newspaper now, but he's been very involved with the government. And then we've had Ben Lewinger, who kind of approaches it from the policy side. Trishelle is our first guest that really brings that point where the rubber hits the road and brings the business perspective on what's actually happening on the ground. Trishelle, thanks so much for joining us here and being our guest today. I wanted to just launch right into it and throw our first question at you. Tell me a little bit about your background and what brings you into cannabis here in New Mexico.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's great to have a chance to talk to you. I am not a New Mexico native, but I've been here for about 10 years, and both my kids were born here, so, you know, it's become home. So I came to New Mexico, as I said, about 10 years ago. I actually finished my education here at UNM. I have 2 degrees from UNM, bachelor's with a marketing focus, and then also an MBA with a finance focus. And starting at UNM, I realized really quickly that New Mexico was different than a lot of the other places I've been. I moved here from Phoenix, so the size and really just the community aspect was almost shocking to me, just how community oriented this whole state is. So after I finished my MBA, I went to work at a local solar company. I spent 5 years there, and I loved it. I mean, it was an amazing experience. It was a locally owned and operated business. I learned a lot about, you know, what the impact of local business is on an economy versus larger, you know, outside ownership businesses, and also how, you know, New Mexico is unique. And so I think that being locally owned and operated helps you really meet the needs of New Mexicans. And so I loved that experience. I got to know a lot of really great people. I got to be really involved in, you know, just bringing more solar to the state. And when I decided it was time to make my next move, I was looking for industries that were kind of in the same place solar was when I joined, which was really emerging on the cusp of growth, but still, you know, locally owned, smaller shops, you know, people that were just kind of getting into it. And I also it's really important to me to be in a community-based business. That was, you know, my biggest goal. I loved working locally. I wanted to keep working locally. And so when I met the ownership group of Everest, it really just checked all the boxes for me. You know, it's homegrown. It's, you know, there's just a lot of passion here. They were really, really committed to quality, and that was interesting to me. But I'll tell you, I knew almost nothing about cannabis. I was not a consumer. I had never seen a cannabis plant. I don't think I could have picked one out of a lineup.
Wow.
And so it's been an amazing education. And the team at Everest has taught me so much. You know, they got me right in the grow, and I got to learn how to, you know, trim and prune and water. And it was just fascinating. You know, I never worked with plants in my whole life, and I've really worked behind a computer my whole career. And so, you know, coming to an industry like this that's very hands-on was amazing. And, you know, Everest at that point, we had 4 stores. We now have 7 stores. We're getting ready to open 2 more. And you know, we've gotten into manufacturing since I've been here, and that's also really interesting. We've doubled our cultivation footprint, and we're looking at expanding more. And so it's a high growth industry. It's a high growth company. And it's just been a wonderful education for me in, you know, just this vertically integrated, vertically integrated business in the very truest sense of it. We're literally seed to sale. How many businesses can say that? We have agriculture, we have production, we have retail, we have marketing, we have the whole thing. And we are, we're kind of specializing in all of it, which has been, it's been amazing. And, the other thing about New Mexico that, and I think Everest and everything about it is, it's hard to meet a single medical cannabis patient and not walk away feeling passionate, because the patients in New Mexico are just amazing. And, I had the opportunity when I was first getting trained, they trained me to go behind the counter and check in customers, so I'm having a chance to talk to these people as they're getting checked in. And, this is stories that come out and the benefits, how cannabis has changed their lives. It's just what I think the most amazing thing that I've experienced in the last 2 years is just the passion. The people working in the industry, the people participating in the industry. And I love it. It's a really, really tough business. It's like things that you take for granted in other businesses, you don't have in cannabis, or they're so much harder in cannabis, or they're so much more expensive in cannabis. But it's easy to stay energized when you're just surrounded by passion. So it's an awesome business.
Well, it's so cool to hear that story. I particularly like the aspect of someone from another state coming in here and really falling in love with the culture and sticking around. I was born and raised here, but I left for a long time as well, and I'm just now coming back myself. And I'm having the same experience you are. I'm falling in love with the culture and the community aspect. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about Everest, but before I jump into that, just referring back to your background in solar, how do you see solar playing a role in the emerging, so just the current cannabis business, but also this emerging particular, the legal use side of it as it comes along? How do you see solar playing a role there?
I think there's a lot of opportunities to incorporate renewable energy. Financing is a bit of a challenge for us, though, and I think that that's kind of the biggest roadblock that I see is we don't have access to traditional financing because of the banking laws, and that makes any kind of big capital investment challenging. But I do feel like there's a lot of opportunity for renewals. I know that there are some producers and manufacturers that have already made those investments, and I think that there's a lot of synergy there. We have an amazing solar resource in New Mexico, probably one of the best in the world. And that same solar resource helps us grow cannabis. So there's a lot of opportunity for synergy there. And I think that, as some of these things change on the federal level or as more financing options become available, I think we'll see a lot more adoption of renewable energy, because that's the other thing that I find in the industry is, specifically at Everest, but I think it goes throughout the industry, is there's a lot of passion for sustainability. Just the people who love cannabis seem to love sustainability too. So I feel like there's a future there, and I don't think it's very far away. As I said, people are already doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Our farm has invested in greenhouses already, so that's solar resource, and we think it's absolutely the way to go. We've experienced here in eastern New Mexico a drought for, call it 10 to 15 years. The other side of that, though, is what do we have? Massive amounts of sunlight, exactly as you point out. So if your growing can be indoors in a facility where you can control the water and have, all the access you need, the solar footprint, I think, makes a ton of sense. So I totally agree with you. Now back to Everest. You said you currently had, I think, 5 stores. You're adding 2 more. Is that right? Or no, you said 7 and you're adding 2 more. Yeah. 7. So that's exciting. What are some of the other things you're doing, and how do you see Everest participating in the legal market that is hopefully coming right in front of us?
Yeah, so as you said originally, we have several stores in Albuquerque. We also have a store in Los Lunas, one in Las Cruces. So we're going to be opening up, and also one in Rio Rancho. We're going to be opening up in Santa Fe relatively soon, so we're excited about that. And we're also, as I said, we've gotten into manufacturing in the last year and a half, and we feel like there's a lot of opportunity to diversify the products that are currently available, really focusing on what the patients want, what the customers want, what's not available in the market right now, and also making sure that we have really top quality and a very consistent experience. So I think that consistency and experience is incredibly important. to people.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, with that, by having our own manufacturing, we're doing more. We have an awesome capsule product that's vegan. It's no sugar, you know, it's there's no smell, there's no taste.
Wow.
And, you know, there's products like that out there, but there's a lot of people who can't intake a gummy or an edible that's really sugary. And so that's one of the products we have, and we love it. It's an amazing product. It's my personal favorite. And we want to do more of that. And then on the other side, you know, we also have, we do a soil grow here in greenhouses, and we have a very sustainable grow. We don't use pesticides. We try and be as organic as possible. And that allows us to provide really high quality cannabis. And so I think that's really, you know, another important thing that really the market in general, I think, is really motivated to do that. But one thing we know about New Mexicans is they like quality.
Right.
And so, you know, how do we make sure that we're serving quality to the people who want it? I think that's the most important thing for us. And when it comes to legalization, I mean, we're excited for an adult use market. And I think it's really important to all existing producers as well as to the governor's office to make sure that our patients are taken care of. And you know, what I've seen and heard about legislation that came up in the last session was that continues to be a big focus, because we all love our patients. The patients are amazing. But I think that the patients also benefit from an adult use market. It's higher volumes, it's better economies of scale, it's better prices, there's product availability, you know, there's more access to cannabis, more retail locations. I mean, there's a lot of ways that this really benefits people, especially in the more rural markets that aren't as served currently. So I think that, you know, we're looking forward to it. We think it'll be really good for New Mexico. We feel like we'll be able to, you know, just continue that mission of quality as we work towards an adult use market.
So one thing you were just discussing was this development that Everest is into with respects to its non-flower based products. So it's edibles and these other kinds of products that come from the extracts. The market, most legal markets, whether it's Canada or the States here in the US, the market has gone that way to less flower available and more on the extract side for a number of reasons. It seems like that's tending to be the experience in New Mexico as well. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that's right. I would say that New Mexico loves its flower. I think that's very true. I think we have a pretty flower heavy market, but also I think that as people get comfortable with cannabis, get comfortable with different ways of consuming cannabis, get comfortable with, you know, the idea of microdosing and how that can benefit them, I think that's where products can kind of fill that gap. Also, for people who don't want to smell like cannabis or don't want to inhale smoke, you know, especially in a COVID era, right? Sure. I think that products really could fill a void there for a lot of people. I don't think that flower is ever going to go away. I think that New Mexico will, at least, I mean, right now it's a huge portion of our sales, and I think that'll stay. But I think that, you know, as more products become available, it becomes even more important for the flower to be quality flower.
Excellent, excellent. Now, if we fast forward just a little bit, you mentioned a second ago the current legislation. That kind of brings us to this special session conversation. It starts tomorrow. What are your thoughts? What are you expecting is going to happen in this process?
You know, I'm really optimistic. You know, I feel like we got really far in the session. We had some great conversations. We started talking about micro licenses. The industry was very aligned around, you know, bringing more people into the industry and just making sure that we're, you know, protecting the people that are the patients that are currently in it. And so I think that, you know, where we left it in the session, it was disappointing to see it not make it all the way. But a lot of things happened along that process that were really, really positive. And it seems like we have a lot of people who are trying to make this work for New Mexico. You know, New Mexicans want it, and I think that the legislature hears that, and that people are, you know, the leadership is motivated to try and bring about an adult use program. So I don't know exactly what's going to be in the legislation, but I don't see them starting from scratch. I think that, you know, we made a lot of progress in the session, and that's something I'm really optimistic about. So I'm optimistic. I mean, it'll be interesting. It's going to be an interesting couple of days. But I think that, at the end, I think we're going to end up with a program that's really good for New Mexico.
So, and we hope so as well. We're 100% aligned with what you just said. Now, I want to ask you a question. I hope it doesn't come off any bit controversial, but there was a lot of discussion about plant count throughout the legislative process in both the House and the Senate. Plant count, some didn't want it, some absolutely wanted it. Where do you come out on this? Should there be a plant count? Are you flexible on it? What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when we're talking about plant count and how to build an adult use program, I think it's really helpful to look at other states and see what other states did. So one of the key arguments around plant count is Oregon, for example. So they started out without a plant count. They had an oversupply. It, deflated the price of cannabis. That was really challenging for a whole bunch of people for a whole bunch of reasons.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then they added back into the legislation a mechanism to control production. And, I think that production management is an important concept. I don't know that necessarily it's a plant count, specific plant count. I don't think necessarily, I don't know exactly what that mechanism is. It's not my area of expertise, but I think that what we need in New Mexico is an economically viable industry. So that means having enough products, that means having enough producers, that means having the right prices. It also means, and we don't have an economically viable industry if, the price of a product is artificially deflated. That doesn't help New Mexico. So I don't know exactly what the right way to manage production is, but I think that, for me, it's all about economic viability. And, New Mexico gets tax revenue, we get great jobs, we get investment when we have a good industry. And I think that's really what New Mexico needs is diversification of tax revenue. We also need jobs that our kids want to stay here for, and those are cannabis jobs.
Yeah.
My workforce is very young. They're very motivated. People want to work in cannabis. And so, when we're looking at plant count, I think the real question is how do we make sure we have an economically viable industry? And how do we also make sure that we're able to balance supply and demand? And I think that there's a lot of ways to do that. And, what they end up doing at the end, I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I think that's for me, that's what it comes down to, is just making sure that we have a real economy, a real industry here.
Now, this brings me to the next question. When you talk about industry, and I know you're the COO, you're the Chief Operating Officer at Everest, which means you have some sort of responsibility for margins. Now, I've read some of your previous comments. There's difficulty, obviously, in the cannabis industry for a lot of reasons. You mentioned banking, finance, and whatnot. But talk to me a little bit about the tax structure of cannabis and how that affects margins right now in a way that probably isn't all that fair.
Yeah, we operate under this really difficult tax code. It's 280E. It was put in place, I want to say, in the early 1980s. And the idea was that for illegal, this is my understanding, I'm no tax expert, but this is my understanding. It was put in place to keep illegal drug dealers from expensing their costs to sell an illegal product. And even though we have a state charter, we're operating legally, we still work under this tax code. So what it says is that we cannot deduct the cost of any selling or marketing of a Schedule I drug. And so that's a lot. Selling and marketing is a lot of what we do. That, there's a lot of ways this can and has been interpreted, but we have sales staff, we have stores, and so it makes our tax bills. I mean, I've read a whole bunch of different descriptions of this, but it just makes it a lot more expensive. What we pay in taxes is more than a traditional. If you put me side by side with another retail business that has the exact same structure, we're going to pay significantly more in taxes. And that's challenging. It's even more challenging when you recognize that we don't have access to traditional lending or traditional banking, or, we do have access to banking, but not in the same way that other corporations do. So it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge that, as producers, we talk about it all the time. It's just one of those, that's a federal change that needs to happen. and you just try and manage through it in the meantime. But it's one of the many things, and one of the biggest things that does make cannabis so much more expensive than traditional business.
Now, if I could offer, an upside to this in the future, it could be that if you can get in and get competitive, as Everest is, in the future, if this tax issue gets relief, it could be a real upside to you, right? Because if you're already established at these margins, you're good with them. I mean, it can only be up in the future, I would assume.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of things happening at the federal level. The Safe Banking Act is a great example. It is exactly right though. If you can figure out how to operate in these challenging and expensive conditions, these things change at a federal level, and it's great for us.
That's fantastic. We really appreciate your time, and we really enjoy hearing all these thoughts from your perspective deep in the industry here in New Mexico. Is there anything you'd like to leave our viewers with about the state of cannabis here in New Mexico?
I think that the thing that I think is the most important is that this really is a job provider, and it's a career maker for people, and it's I just want to say it again, these are jobs that people want. I think when we're looking at, doing cannabis in New Mexico, there's a whole bunch of reasons. We have a great environment for it. We have a lot of public positivity towards it. But I think that what New Mexico really needs more than anything is more jobs, and the kind of jobs people want. And I think that's really what cannabis provides. And so we're hopeful that we get adult use out of this special session, because more jobs, it benefits us in so many ways. And I think that's what I'm most excited about.
That's fantastic. How can consumers in New Mexico find Everest? Where do they find them online?
So you can find us at everestnm.com, and you can get to all our locations. We have live menus. We have residential delivery, so you can find all that on our website.
That's fantastic. Trishelle Kirks, Chief Operating Officer of Everest Apothecary. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.